Today we're going to talk about all the work that I've done to make it easy to continuously deploy and share games as you develop them. We're also going to talk about the plans for Final Parsec's next product and some of the next steps for the Office Sim game that I'm working on. If this is your first time here, thanks for joining. My name is Bear, and Final Parsec is all about building tools and resources to help others develop their own games. So let's get into the big thing this week, which is publishing and playing games. We have this concept of anonymous games, which are uploaded to Final Parsec in the absence of an owner. We're doing this to make sharing games as frictionless as possible, particularly in cases where you're uploading with our Unity editor plugin or some sort of automation. I've been working to make this use case a little more feature-rich. When you visit your anonymous game and you're signed in, you can claim them to associate it to your account. We've also added this option to transfer the game assets to an existing game that you own, and then dispose of the anonymous game. This is meant to support a workflow where you're publishing temporary games from the editor until you're happy with it. Then you can commit to applying those changes to your real game tied to your profile. I've also covered the critical functionality of adding and removing assets for games that you own this week too, which can be done from the Manage Game page. I'm planning to cover a lot of what else that I consider to be critical functionality in that way pretty rapidly here over the next week or so. Adding support for deleting a game entirely, managing markdown summaries to show content with your game, managing preview images, and renaming games if you want. Previously, all this was only written to play the Unity games that we were making, but I've made some updates this week so that it can play games exported from Godot, and really any games generically built using WebGL and an HTML canvas. I try to abstract this away from you. Literally, all you do is just upload the assets you have for whatever tool you're working with, and the app should just interpret it and run it. I started introducing a documentation page, which for now covers authentication with our API. I'll be adding on to this over the coming week to cover the game upload feature. I see this as a living doc I can add to over time, which can be a good reference for anyone trying to use our API or tools. Speaking of our API, I'm excited to announce a cool new GitHub action which relies on it. This publish game action is available, which publishes these games on your behalf in any workflow that you want to set up. It's open source on the GitHub marketplace and available for anyone to use. I've made a proof of concept on my Office Sim repository, which is also open source and available for you to reference. This workflow right now will deploy an anonymous game to Final Parsec each time you open and commit to a pull request. I want to enhance this so that it doesn't always just make a new game, but lets you update existing ones in place. It should work really well if you want to quickly adjust and share playable games. My ultimate vision is that you have an unlisted game that you can iterate on while you're working in a branch, and then your real game, which is updated when you commit or merge to your main branch. Over the next week, it's my plan to write up a new blog post covering this workflow and being a bit of a how-to on setting up your own CI/CD pipeline for a Godot game. I also intend to productize the game hosting feature by just putting a limit on how much data you can store. Asset storage will for sure be the thing that scales costs for me as a provider, so getting heavy users to pay based on that makes a lot of sense to me. This is basically the same freemium model that I've applied to the world building tool. With all that in place, I think I'll be in a good spot to actually start iterating on the Office Sim game. I've been drawing a little bit of art for the game in my spare time, but I don't have anything to share quite yet. I'd also like to get into the core mechanics, which I imagine will be hiring workers to produce goods and then getting customers to buy them. Some original art and figuring out that core game loop is something I've slated a good amount of time for in February and something I'm really excited to go and work on. I've mentioned in some previous videos that I am working against a little bit of a deadline to migrate off of an old web app, still hosting parts of the site, before mid-February. That'll save me some infrastructure costs if I can get all that done. This week I moved over a couple pages related to our game hosting and the jump calculator. I just touched up the UI on these a bit, but otherwise they remain largely the same. If you're building a platform and you haven't tried out our jump calculator, I would recommend you go play with it. It can save you a lot of time and experimentation and tweaking values as you work to just get the right feel for your game. It even exports a script, which you can attach to your player in Unity to save you writing some code for player movement too. That's all the major stuff this week. Nothing got shipped on the world builder, but we are still working in the background on image generation using AI. Keep an eye on the artboard feature for some updates in the near future. I still plan to add a streak counter to the dailies feature here. Dailies give you a writing prompt encouraging you to practice your storytelling for your games each day but I was just too caught up working on the game deployment pipeline features this week. This is the last week of the sale celebrating the new world building tool. If you want to get 50% off of your purchase there, use the code NEWWORLD at checkout. That code expires January 31st, and you will have missed your chance after that. All right, I think I'm out of things to share for this week. I appreciate you sticking around to the end to watch the whole thing. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. I make new videos every week. Drop a comment below if you have any features you'd like to see me build or any topics related to game development that you'd like to see me dive into in a future video. I'll see you next week. Bye.